Yeah. Yeah, I'll take I can
Hi.
take Jules's piece today.
Okay,
All
you will?
right.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Hi, Jeff. How you doing today?
Excellent. And yourselves?
Good. I asked you this earlier, but where are you located?
I'm in Calgary, Alberta, where it's currently about 20 below zero. So
Yikes.
Oh,
that's Celsius, but it's still cold.
Wow.
yeah. So do you have like a big snow blower?
I do, and it's currently broken. So
Ah,
So you snowed in?
well,
Oh,
Not yet.
no.
no, we're good. It's cold, but it's not snowing.
Okay.
We'll take it. It's going to snow later today, but by then I should be in Lethbridge, which is probably even worse than here. So
Mm.
you're getting your
gosh.
own physical workout now because you're having to do
Indeed.
your own shoveling, right?
exactly.
I just got
Well,
back.
welcome.
I just got back from a weekend in Florida. It was really hot. It was like close to in the low 90s.
Yeah, I don't need to hear that, Howard.
A little too hot.
Yeah, and the other two are in Mexico.
We're on
somewhere,
either
so-
sides of Mexico right now, so
I'm back in New Jersey now.
yeah.
But
Yeah,
it's
I'm in Puerto Vallarta right now, but I normally live in Colorado.
So yeah.
So very, very happy to have you today. We're very excited to get going here.
We're going to go live here in just a second. We've got a couple of folks are listening live on, into the Zoom. So if you guys have comments, questions for Jeff, make sure you put those in there and we will pass those along. So yep, lots of people joining us already. So welcome. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you're calling in from. And
Yes.
it's so nice to be together today. This is just like part of the week I look forward to is
We
this
are
People
very
Strategy Forum.
global. We are a global people strategy forum, man. We are from everywhere. We even have one of our colleagues from India. So
Wonderful.
so it looks like we're getting to the top of the hour, huh?
Sue says in Lethbridge you can sweep the snow.
It's good. I'm hoping, Sue, that by the time I get down there later today, the snow will have stopped and the wind will have blown it all to Medicine Hat. So
Okay, it's the top of the hour, so we're gonna go ahead and get going here across get going here. Okay, da, 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 da.
I'm streaming.
It's beaming it up, Scotty. Okay.
Yeah, we feel like we're beaming it up a lot.
Okay, let's see. Okay. All right, you guys talk amongst yourselves.
Oh,
and we'll
okay.
do that in a second
So
here.
Jeff, tell me, do you ever get out of the cold? Do you ever travel?
we're getting back into it. I mean, it hasn't been a whole lot of travel over the last few years because of COVID, but yeah, I used to do a lot of motorcycle riding actually down in Mexico. So
You did?
hopefully we'll get into some more of that this year. And I've spent a lot of time in your home state in Colorado, also riding.
Oh, you have? Okay.
Lovely place.
Well, down here in Puerto Vallarta, seriously, I live in a community. It's a majority is Canadian.
Hmm.
Even us Americans are kind of and Mexicans in my community are kind of the minority.
Yep. There's a really big.
Yeah.
I used to ride out of a little town kind of inland from you, south of Guadalajara, called Ajijic, which is there's a huge Canadian expat community down there, and
Yes.
so yeah, quite a few.
They're our friends. I mean, they think Americans are kind of interesting,
You could say that.
right? As Americans. But we enjoy it. That's really
Mhm.
great.
Cool.
So we're just about to pull up the PowerPoint just to get us
Yeah,
started.
we're going to go ahead and get started. So welcome everyone to the People Strategy Forum, live from all over the planet. And we'd love to know where you are joining us from today. So please post that in the chat. We'd love to hear, are you warm? Are you freezing cold? Are you waiting for spring to start? But you know, this is the part of the week we all look forward to. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here. And let's see. Oops. Da, da, da. Many buttons. Here we go.
Yeah, and I'm super excited to say we've been doing these people strategy forums since the pandemic. We were hoping to start our leadership people strategy forums live in person with executives, CEOs, and HR leaders. And then when COVID hit, we decided we needed to do this online. So we started this whole Zoom process and actually learned to do that. But we found that it was becoming quite popular because many leaders and executives work remotely. So that's how we got going. So here we go.
Well, we're so glad to have you here today, Jeff. And, you know, we're talking about using competencies for success, which is an area that I am super passionate about, and I can't wait to learn from you. So thank you so much for sharing that with us today. And, you know, just to kind of introduce some of the regulars for those of you that are joining us for the first time. Howard Nisewitz, he is a rewards and systems strategist, and he is just a guru about all things related to compensation systems. And if you want to get him going, talk about how much you love spreadsheets, and Howard will never stop talking. Okay. Yeah, we have kind of an anti-spreadsheet platform here. And I want to introduce Shar Miller. She's our people strategist, but she's so much more than that. You know, she's had a long history and now is an entrepreneur and been in all sorts of industries. And, you know, her theme is really how to have HR with a heart. And I love that because it's just about bringing you the people part back to people management. And I'm Wendy Graham, and I'm also a people strategist, and my area is learning and development, talent management. I'm really passionate about helping people enable them to change and, you know, choose change for themselves and move through change. So that's one thing I'm really excited about. And doing a lot of work with competencies these days. So I'm glad to hear what Jeff has to say for us. So introducing Jeff Griffiths. You're a competency geek. I love that. It's like pretty much one of the best titles ever at Workforce Strategies International. And, you know, you are helping organizations to really fine tune their approach so that they can be as powerful and performing as possible. So would love to just hear a little bit more about you, Jeff, and how you got into this, why this is your passion, and why should our listeners even care about this? For me, the word competency can sometimes be off-putting because there's just so many syllables. Like, what the heck is it even, right? And why care?
Well, and I think, I mean, to answer the second question first, like what is competency? There's as many definitions of it as there probably are consultants dealing with it, because it's a relatively young field. And I agree with you, it gets off-putting because people, when you say competency, they start thinking incompetent, which, you know, drives people away. So we work with competencies. We don't spend a whole lot of time actually, you know, kind of talking about it. What we talk about is getting stuff done. Right. And in a way that matters to the organization and to the individual. And so now I'll go back to your first question, like, how did I get into this? Like most consultants, I think by mistake. My first career, I was an officer in the Canadian Air Force. And I was the one thing the military does better than anything else that it does, and probably in many cases, the only thing it does really, really well is develop people.
Right.
And they spent an awful lot of time and an awful lot of resources developing people. Begins on day one, first day of boot camp, and it lasts until you finally punch your ticket and get out. And as I was an instructor. Instructors in the military are, running a training organization in the military is not something that you do as a career. It's something you do. They pull you out of operations and they make you an instructor for a while, and then they send you back to your real job. And so we're all versed in the idea of developing people and training and development, and that it's kind of part and parcel of being in the military. One of my tours, I was a operations officer on a radar squadron, and we were tiny, we were tiny by Canadian standards, and by American standards, we were microscopic in terms of our the number of people that we had. We were assigned to go down, actually, this back in 1993, so ancient history. We were assigned to go and plug a gap in the US radar coverage along the Mexican border, which is not where you expect to find a bunch of Canadians, but that's a whole different story.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so we went with literally everything we owned, which we packed onto one American transport that came to get us, and spent 2.5 months working on this covert operation down along the Mexican border with 12 people. And we're only at any one time, 3 of us actually out on the radar once we got things set up. The unit that eventually came to replace us, which I understand was a Marine Corps unit, US Marine Corps, and they travel light. They had like 75 people that they brought with them. And I was like, how is that possible? Like, how were we able to do what we did? And we got actually a NORAD commander's commendation out of this thing. How were we able to do what we did with so few people? And I mean, partly out of necessity, because in the Canadian military, we're always strapped for resources. But the approach that we took was whole person competency, letting people do whatever it was they were capable of doing, regardless of what their job description said, regardless of what their area of specialization was, and allowing them to, be the best that they could be. Like I said, partly because we didn't have any choice. But afterwards started thinking about this and actually doing it on purpose. And using that as the key to development. Now, with a really small organization, that's possible. When I got out of the military and started working in industry, a couple of things happened. First thing that happened was the things that I took for granted in the military didn't actually exist in the corporate world. And the way that we had run this small unit, which was, there was still a hierarchy, but we kind of ran it like a hockey team, like who's in charge is whoever's got the puck, right? You can't really micromanage a hockey game. You just got to kind of drop the puck, get out of the way, and let the players figure it out. And I found in most organizations that I've worked with in manufacturing and other places since then, that's not the way they think, right? It's very much a hierarchical organization. There's very much a lot of emphasis on standardized procedures and doing what you're told. And so eventually I wound up doing this for a living, taking what I've learned over, through my military career and training and development and what I've learned in organizational development, and trying to shift the paradigm for organizations towards this people-centric approach. Because we think it makes companies more agile. Well, we don't think, we know it makes companies more agile, more capable, more future-proof, and it's just a way better place to work, right? It's terrifying for management to give up control that way, but you actually gain control by doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of what I've been doing for the last 20 odd years. Wow. And it's been a fascinating journey. But go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. So I'm curious, so I have said this as an HR business partner. I have said that, oftentimes employers really lead to, they like a person or they think this person is a good fit for this role and they hire this person for a role. But I've always said it really needs to start with the business and the business strategy and the vision of the business. And then you align the competencies and the skill set and the talent to the needs of the business. So my question to you is, did you start out that way when you say that in that experience that you really started learning the competencies and the talents of your team and having each person do their best? How did you do that? I mean, what was the process? Did you do an assessment, or was it an organic process in that particular scenario?
A little bit of both. And one of the things in the military, we'll go back, I'm assuming you're talking about my
I'm talking about the
time,
military, but yeah, I'm back
the
there.
little radar that could, right?
Right.
In the military, we have a certain amount of turnover every year because people post in, people post out. It's normal, and we have no control over it. Like, we don't get to hand pick who comes. We get whoever they send us. So your first job as a senior NCO or an officer is to open the personnel file and look. So-and-so is posting in. Where have they been? What have they done? What training have they received? What, beyond their occupational code, all the little subcodes that come underneath that tell us, okay, this is kind of who this person is, whether we've ever met them before or not. And then, all right, knowing what I know about what this person's skill set is, their competencies are based on their on their employment record, where do I fit them into my organization so that I can make the best use of what they're bringing to the table, but also how do I put them into a place where I can develop them for their next job, which might be, they might be gone from the unit in 2 years. So that's a constant thing in the military, and we're constantly thinking about it. Beyond, that's the formal part of it. The informal part of it comes from just getting to know people and understanding what I always call whole person competency, because no one is their job description and everybody has a life outside of work, right? And so we had the advantage, because we were a small unit, we could take kind of a more personalized approach with our teams. I mentioned, we ran it like a hockey team. We had a hockey team, which also punched above its weight because we worked really well together. Now, on the hockey team, myself and the commanding officer, I was the deputy commander. We were just plugs, right? We were back end defensemen. The people running the team were like, they were corporals and privates, because they were actually way better hockey players than we were. So we let them do that. And so we got into this notion, I think, of understanding everybody, what their skill sets were, both based on their particular job, but also on all the other stuff. So as an example, we didn't have anybody specifically assigned to our unit who looked after our generators and our other equipment. But we had a couple of folks who built hot rods and things like that in their spare time. They loved tinkering with stuff like that. Guess what?
Wow.
They looked after the generator sets. They looked after all the motive power stuff, even though they were radar techs or operations people or whatever. And then we encouraged all this cross-pollination across the unit, so that, once we identified skill sets and we identified talent that people had, whole person competency outside of their role, it's also, okay, so how do we give them opportunities to grow all these other things that they like to do, and encourage that cross training, encourage all the operations people to understand basic maintenance functions, maintenance people to be able to do all the basic operations functions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And again, partly from necessity, because we had such a small operation, but partly because it just made so much more sense. And as officers, as senior NCOs on that unit, our major responsibility was understanding who the people were that were working for us. And it was a constant ongoing thing. And then finding ways to make use of those talents,
Okay.
what I like to call, sure, go ahead.
Can we jump ahead now to
Sure.
22 years later?
Sure.
And I know Wendy and Howard have some questions too, but how do you translate that today? And how do you move forward to talent management strategy in today's workforce? And second of all, how do you get executive buy-in?
Mhm.
And what Workforce Strategies Internationals offers today?
Yeah. So that's a multi-part question.
Yes.
I'm how do we translate it into the organizational structure of the future? I think we're in a position right now with technology where we can finally extend that view of, you know, the big picture view across a large organization where you can have teams of teams operating semi-autonomously within an organization. Because we have the capability now through technology to allow an individual who ordinarily would have had a kind of a worm's eye view of where the organization is going, to have the big picture and to understand how they fit into it. And so operating, as a cell, but within an autonomous organization. Martin Reeve, another consultant, has a great TED Talk that everybody should watch, where he talks about the organization as an immune system, right? Which is layered. It has a certain amount of redundancy. It has specialization. It has all these other things. And it operates on its own. It does what it does without being told, right? And it does that in the service of the larger organization because it understands its role. And if you think about an organization functioning that way, as an executive, as a manager, how does each of these little pieces work? How do they connect to the whole? And how do we maintain, some insight into what's going on in other places? Technology will allow us to do that. But the biggest issue, as you said, is executive buy-in. It's recognizing that by letting it go, right? By letting people do what they're trained to do, what they're capable of doing, by allowing people to make mistakes, ideally not huge ones, and learning from those mistakes, you get a degree of performance that is beyond what the program says you can achieve. You get a degree of buy-in and engagement that is unsurpassed. And ultimately, you wind up with, better safety records, better quality records, higher productivity, lower cost, more profitability, and an ability to be agile in the marketplace. It's really hard to get managers and executives in a traditional organization to think that way. We normally start on the fringes, right? I mean, you find a little black ops cell someplace that can operate without a lot of oversight from the central body. That might be one plant in a multi-plant operation, right? And you get them to start thinking this way and working this way. And then when their results take off, people notice. Smart organizations go, okay, so what are you doing and how do we do it everywhere else? Stupid organizations will find a way to shut it down because it's nonconformist. But if you can, start on the fringes that way, convince a small organization or a small subunit within a larger organization to change that paradigm, and then let that build out and infect the rest of the organization. It's almost viral. In a small organization, you can start from the top and work down. In a larger organization, you've got to kind of work off the fringes. But it is possible, and I think the acceleration of remote, virtual environments, hybrid environments, is forcing organizations to think more this way. And so we're certainly noticing a lot more people paying attention to it, now 3 years after the world blew up, than certainly we did in, say, 2019.
Mhm.
How do you get?
Go ahead, Howard.
How do you get started? I mean, did you once you sort of get the initial buy-in, do you use testing, or how do you assess whatever the essential competencies that are needed or the competencies that the individuals have? You kind of walk us through that process.
Yeah, I mean, it starts with alignment to strategy, right? And we look at human capital practices. We look at how those human capital practices are aligned with the strategy, as well as the level of maturity of the organization, because they're often misaligned. If you're trying to, as an example, if you're trying to do coaching and mentoring, but you haven't fully identified competencies within the teams and within the individuals, it's very hard to run an effective mentoring program. So we kind of drill down and we look at what's going on structurally within the organization. And then we'll work with managers and incumbent workers and figure out, okay, so what is it that makes someone successful here at a team level, at an organizational level? What are the competencies? And we don't need 800 of them. We need a handful that are actually observable, measurable, and usable in the day-to-day operations of the organization. And then how does that align with the overall values and drive of the company? And we're always seeking alignment. And then, if there are gaps, right? Okay, so how do we fill those gaps? What's the fastest way to fill those gaps? Well, the fastest way is by having people who are really good at things teach people who aren't. So it's about, again, at a managerial level, understanding job assignments and how that leads to competency, understanding the different approaches to competency management and performance management based on the level of expertise and proficiency that an individual has and the key competencies that they need to do their job. So there's a lot of coaching of managers. A lot of working one-on-one with management and with experienced workers within the organizations. Generally, they know better than management does what's really necessary in order to be good at your job. And working on that and consistently measuring and moving it forward that way allows the organization to start seeing some real gains, in key metrics, and usually fairly quickly. The other thing is that by doing it that way and by focusing on at the team level, you create an incredible amount of engagement from the individuals, because they can see that what they do is actually matters and people actually care, that that they have an input into what's going on. And that level of engagement again accelerates the change in key metrics. And then it just snowballs, right? I mean, we reckon we can take an organization that's mediocre and usually start seeing some significant improvements in results, however you like to measure them, usually within 90 days and often faster than that.
So if I missed something, pardon me. How do you really assess the competencies? I'm hearing you have the conversations and the dialogue. Do you use assessment tools? Do you use any other tools other than coaching dialogue or mentoring coaching discussions?
Yeah, well, again, when we're talking about key things that people do, observable behavioral things that people can do and that you can measure performance on the job with. And so you're testing more or less through observation against a standard that's been established within the organization for what good looks like. What does competent look like in this particular role? And then breaking that down into key performance characteristics that you can manage and observe almost every day. I mean, there are tests that you can do around, psychometric testing and things like that, which are helpful. We found it's usually faster to look at the specifics of what people are actually doing on the job, and measuring where the gaps are there, because that's something you can deal with immediately. And identify do some diagnostics at that level and understand, okay, where is the gap? Why is it that they're having that issue? Right. Changing that way. So we'll do formal testing if necessary, but we think a lot of this stuff can be done without. Okay.
So my question is, I'll just use a personal example. Because my vice president would always say I needed to be better in more of my metrics and data
Mhm.
analysis and everything that Howard is really good at, which is also why he's part of our team, because it takes
Mhm.
diversity from a talent management strategy. So where do you get the employees' input about what they perceive their competencies are? And if my VP doesn't think I'm good at data, I might be good at data, but perhaps in a more of a creative type of way.
Mm.
So where do you get the employees' input about their perception of their competency?
Because I think the key role of management is the development of people, right? Individuals and teams. And so those happen in regular conversations, regular constant assessment, right? Which is an ongoing thing. We think the individual should be empowered to have those conversations all the time. No one should ever be surprised by their performance review, right? It should never be. This should be an ongoing thing. It
And
shouldn't be.
sadly, way too many employees, including myself, are so fearful
Hmm.
of that performance review. One, because it's going to impact my raise,
Hmm.
potential promotion, and oftentimes those performance evals feel very negative sometimes. I mean, sometimes they're positive, but I'm
Sometimes.
sorry, I interrupted you.
I think, and it's interesting, and when we look at high performing organizations, they're learning organizations. They're constantly in what, in educational terms, you'd call the zone of proximal development, which is that place kind of just outside your comfort zone where you can't do it by yourself, but you can do it with assistance and support. And an organization that lives there isn't afraid to not be perfect, right? In fact, you expect not to be perfect. So when we look at it, and we try and emulate this in our own organization, is this notion that, if you're 10 on 10 on your performance review, you're in the wrong job. And if you're happy being 10 on 10 in your performance review, you're probably in the wrong company, because we want to come to work every day and learn together towards a solution. And so management aren't those people who have all the answers. Management are people who assemble the teams that will find the answers. And so you're constant in that kind of an environment as an individual, you're pretty aware of where your capabilities are and where they aren't. It's an open book. Your manager's very aware of it, and you're very aware of where your manager's limitations are as well, because it's an open book. And while we have different responsibilities and accountabilities, the idea is to get the most out of the team, right? To achieve whatever it is we have to achieve. And that's a very open environment. And there should never be we try and convince people that someone's not good enough at their job. Whose fault is that? Right? I mean, that's a management problem. Right?
The manager, definitely.
Right. We used to say in the military, there are only 4 reasons why someone doesn't do what they're supposed to do. Right. They don't know they're supposed to do it. That's a management and leadership problem. They don't know how to do it. Well, that's a management and a leadership problem, because they never should have been assigned a job that they couldn't do. They know how to do it, and they know they're supposed to do it, but something else in the environment is preventing them from doing it. Well, that's a management and a leadership problem. Or they don't feel like it. That's a management and a leadership problem. So, right. So everything comes back to, the understanding of competency, the understanding of what people are capable of doing, the understanding of where they want to go, and then finding ways to mix and shuffle the deck so that you're taking the skills and the strengths that people have, applying them optimally within your organization to achieve what it is you're trying to achieve, and providing those opportunities for people to grow and recognize where their particular skill sets may be weak.
Right.
Again,
is that related to what we talked about earlier? You were talking about key messaging. Is that what you mean in these dialogues?
Yeah.
As far as what does that mean?
Well, I mean, you want to have everybody understand where they fit, or where you see them fitting. right? And then that opens the conversation. Where do I think I fit? What do I think I'm capable of? And it's very disheartening and demotivating for an individual to be told, this is what you are, this is who you are, this is what you do, and you're stuck in this box and shut up and do your job. An organization that doesn't act that way, an organization that encourages people to be very open about, here's what I think I'm capable of, let's have some objective measurement around that. Here's where I want to go. Here's how what I'm doing here aligns with my ultimate vision, because everybody in an organization is a volunteer. Ultimately, they can always volunteer to go work someplace else, right? Creating that kind of an open environment, all built around the idea of here's what here's my whole competency, here's where I want to develop it to, and everything else. Those kinds of messages back and forth between management and the individual, and then within the team across between different individuals on the team, is critical. And those conversations should be ongoing, they should be regular, and they should be very fruitful in terms of figuring out where people fit. And if there are gaps, then it's incumbent upon leadership to address them through training, through mentoring, through coaching, through just job shadowing with somebody else, whatever, to close those gaps. Or you wind up with a broken part in the machine that you need to get rid of, right?
Hey, Jeff,
which happens.
We've got a question from our live folks that are joining us live today. So I want to make sure to get that out there. So someone wants to know, could managers create observable and authentic tasks to demonstrate competency? That this then becomes about ability, not perception of ability. What do you think about that question?
Yeah, I mean, we're all for what we call, like competency-based assessment, demonstrated ability to do the work, right? As a criteria when you're building job descriptions, as a criteria that you use for screening candidates for recruiting, as a criteria that you use when you're onboarding somebody. And when you assess people on that basis, A, there's nowhere to hide, and B, there's no room for biased perception of the individual's skill set. And you're not, and this goes back, I mean, I sort of a sidebar, but we're involved in kind of the reintroduction of some of the training within industry stuff from the Second World War. We use it for apprenticeships and rapid skilling and reskilling. So that's the whole Rosie the Riveter thing, right? And you can actually read in there, and that's very much a competency-based approach to developing people and getting things, getting people to where they need to be in terms of skill sets. But you can read language from the TWI reports from 1945 that you would swear were written last week about the social contract between the organization and the individual, about there's a lot of the folks that were trained under that program were women, non-traditional workforce. And, there's literally quotes in the TWI report where they're saying, we don't care what bathroom you use. It's irrelevant. We care that you can do the work. And we know you can do the work. Like evidence is you're cranking out a bomber every day or whatever, and somehow we lost that, around about 1945. And we went back to a different approach. But, we think that competency-based assessment by creating tests, pseudo jobs, potentially not on the customer's product, but on on another, as a simulation, gives the organization an opportunity to test actual competency, right? Actual job fit. And it removes a lot of overt and covert bias from the hiring process and from the development process, which is a good thing, right? And competency-based recruiting as a hiring tool creates a more diverse workforce. Has to, right? It's a necessary side effect of doing a competency-based recruiting policy. Right?
Did you,
So
earlier you mentioned, thank you for that. That was very
Mhm.
helpful. Earlier, in our chat, you were talking about something about how we hire new grads
Mm.
and onboard new grads.
Yeah.
So can you explain what you mean or why you brought up that
Yeah.
topic?
Yeah, it's interesting. Is we look at the data that comes out of Gallup, the Q12, every year, about employee engagement and some of the cross-referencing that they've done around age and level of education as it relates to engagement. So we've looked at that, and it says that the most disengaged people, for anybody who's not familiar with the Q12 surveys, right? But basically it says the most disengaged people are the young kids with degrees, right? And we tend to slag the kids. They're lazy, they're this, they're that, they don't want to do things. We did some research of our own, and we looked at job descriptions through online job descriptions, job postings for a bunch of entry-level positions, and extracted what the competencies and proficiency levels were from those. It's a bit of a brute force approach, but you can figure out what they're really looking for in terms of underlying competencies. And what we found out was just people want to hire some really, really, really impressive entry-level workers, right? Because they, why? Well, we want the best people, so we'll inflate what we're looking for. So they're hiring people because they're really, really smart and have a lot of skill. They may not have a lot of experience, but they're hiring the new grad because of they're smart. They got brains the size of small planets. And then we looked at, within those same things, we looked at the way that new hires, entry-level workers are put in, and what the management structure is around them in the workplace. And when we look at things that we use something called a Dreyfus scale, which basically is, everybody knows what it is, whether they know it as a Dreyfus scale or not, but it's it's that from complete novice, knows nothing, to super expert, knows everything. And if you look at what organizations are trying to hire for, they tend to be looking for relatively proficient and competent people at an entry level. And then they put them into a management structure that's designed to support poor performers and low-skilled workers, where it's very structured. This is what you do. This is how you do it. This is, you give them very little autonomy or ability to go outside of, the process. And we know from the Q12, but also from empirical data, is that's very demotivating. That tends to disengage the worker relatively quickly. So you take someone who's really smart, you put them in a role that says, good, we hired you because you're really, really smart. Now go over here and staple papers together and make photocopies for the next 2 years until you've earned the right.
I'm laughing because my daughter's going through that right now.
Well, and I think it's typical in a lot of organizations with the new hires, and
True.
Which is not to say the new hire should be brought in and made the CEO tomorrow, because they haven't acquired the contextual understanding of the business in order to do that. But to not allow them to use their head it's the perfect way to destroy them and turn them into drones, right? And Peter Drucker said this.
They're gonna leave in 6 months.
They've
already resigned.
Yeah, or worse yet, they stay.
Oh, true.
Right. And so, I mean, Peter Drucker in the 60s, I think, said that, like, two things. Most of what we call management is all the things we put in the way of people actually getting their jobs done. And the second thing is the best way to demotivate or lose a knowledge worker, and pretty much everybody these days is a knowledge worker, and to a greater or lesser degree, was to put them in a structure that made it so they couldn't use their heads.
Yes.
And it doesn't take very long in that kind of an environment for an individual either to de-skill and lose the ability to use their heads, or to just tune out and, you know, do the whole quiet quitting thing. And
Right.
we've lost them, and we've lost all that talent and potential that we hired them for. So again, it requires a different approach to management, and a recognition of this is the skills that you have, this is the talent that you have. Here's how we're going to help you develop that and apply that, and also here's how we're going to help you apply these other things that we know you're missing because you have no context in this
Right.
environment,
So,
so that you grow.
So Jeff, I'm going to make a quick comment because I think that Wendy has something to add. I also believe as a long-term HR leader that you kind of hit on this. I've actually seen employees literally working at a company for 30 years. And the company has not fostered career mobility, to use their head, so to speak. And just allow this more mature, a better way of saying it, individual kind of just, you know, go with the flow, you know, just do just the bare minimum and just kind of glow. And then also, I also see, you know, from an aging population, where we do have aging employees that do want to learn about technology, learn about things to grow. So when you say new grad, I mean, do you see a lot of employers just focusing on younger people, or do they also look at their aging employees as well?
I think they need to look at both, right? Because the job, the market that your organization operates in is not static, right? Standing still is going backwards. And so it's not just finding ways. I mean, I use the example of the new grad, but we also need to be constantly looking at how you grow everybody, right? And focusing, I'll go take a step back here. There was a book that was published by a few McKinsey people a few years ago called Talent Wins. And they talked about, you know, finding that critical 2% of your organization that's going to lead to the future. Hint, none of them are wearing suits and sitting in boardrooms, right? They're all out there creating the future for your organization, and they're actually boots on the ground doing stuff. And they're very clear. Yes, you need to identify who that 2% is and develop the hell out of them. But that doesn't give you an excuse to ignore the other 98.
Correct.
Because they need to be brought along with new skills, new technologies, new opportunities to grow and prosper. And because that allows them to stay engaged, stay relevant. Most of us are going to be working for a long, long time.
Yes, we will.
I don't expect to hang it up at 65 years old. My parents' generation, you retired at 65, but you were probably going to be dead by the time you were 70. Now you retire at 65 and you're going to live to be 90 or 100. You can't retire at 65. You'd go crazy.
Well, and also I think a lot of people lost a lot of their retirement, so they can't retire at 65.
Yeah. And so, but I mean, and there's value that older workers bring to the table in terms of experience, in terms of company culture and everything else. And by continually to develop those additional skills in those people, you're creating a better organization. No one should be allowed to go stale and stagnant, right?
Correct.
And if they do it by choice, they probably need to rethink, do they really belong here?
I think career mentoring is huge, and we can utilize that.
I think it goes across the board.
Wendy, are you seeing any additional comments coming along here?
Well, I just wanted to say we're approaching the top of the hour. This conversation has been so interesting that it's just time's flying by. So reminder, if you're listening live, please put any comments or questions in the chat and I'll make sure to pass those along. And while we're waiting for those to come in, we just want to say that the People Strategy Forum is sponsored by TMA USA. And Jeff, a little bit about CompTeam. We do use a psychometric a tool called TMA. It's out of the Netherlands. And that's something that Shar and I work with quite a bit. And, like, I don't think it, I am partial to this tool because I worked with so many different ones over the years, and this one has just continues to blow my socks off. So we want to say thank you to TMA USA for sponsoring the People Strategy Forum so that we can have these conversations, because our whole mission is to engage, energize, and elevate the workforce experience. That's what we're all about. That's what this podcast and forum is all about. So thank you for, reminding managers, reminding us as, peers and colleagues about, the mind shift change that has to take place, both for these younger generations that are coming in, as well as people who are, up in age, who are actively contributing and have a lot to give. So, and that's what really TMA is all about, as well as really trying to help identify those competencies for success, and then be able to measure them, and then be able to align them with the values of the organization.
And I invite you, Jeff, to try this, because I have actually utilized the TMA with my personal company. Now, yeah, we were small with near 30 employees, but we applied the TMA methodology from every cycle of the talent management strategy, and we became a multi-million-dollar company. So, yeah, small company. So I would find it interesting, even if you even took the TMA, and just let us know what you think. It's all about positive psychology and positive dialogue.
Excellent.
I'll actually put that offer out to anyone who's listening. If you you can message support at CompTeam.net, and we would be glad to let you try the assessment. It's more than assessment. It's really about the employee experience from hire to retire, and even moving out of the organization. So anyways, so that's a little bit about TMA. And if anybody's listening and wants to learn more, we do have a question coming in, but I want to tell you a little bit about our speaker next week, Patrick Sutton. He's going to talk about why be a unicorn when you can be a legend, creating a legend in your leadership. So join us next week for that. And then I would just want to ask you this final question, Jeff, and then I want to turn it over to you to tell us how people can find you if they want to learn more about Workforce Strategies International. So the last question is just, will this be made available? Yes. So our forum goes live every Wednesday from 11:30, from noon to 1 on the East Coast. And once it goes live across all of social media, and once it gets we're done today, it will be live on all of our social media platforms: YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, our webpage, CompTeam.net. And then this will also be converted to a podcast. So if you're just kind of driving in the car and you want to check it out and listen, you can listen online, or whatever you're doing, you can multitask, take a walk your dog, and catch up at the same time. So yes, this will be available. And if you want to email support at CompTeam.net, we can send you the link, or you can go to our website and check it out. So Jeff, how can people find you? Thank you so much for being with us today.
Like I said, as a competency geek, being able to talk about this with people who get
Okay, Jeff, you're actually cutting out a little bit.
Really, really cool. Ooh,
I'm going to have you say that again, because you cut out. Okay, there you are. Come back. Tell us that one more time. Jeff, how can people get a hold of you if they want to learn more about what you do and what you offer?
The two easiest ways are look me up on LinkedIn and connect with me there, and shoot me a question or whatever that way. The other way is via our obviously our corporate website. So www.workforcestrat.com, and we're there. There's again, there's blogs and things, and you can comment on those. I am, Jeff at workforcestrat.com. So shoot me an email directly. I will answer it, and we can carry on the conversation that way.
Well, Jeff, the comment was, there are people in my organization who really need to see this. I'd like to share with them. So thank you for talking about a really important topic today. because this is important. It's a whole change in, how we're working. Kind of bringing it back to the initial topic is, the whole person competency you talked about. And, that struck a chord with me because I was part of an organization that got acquired many, many times. And it's as if I was like a new employee each time, only because I came in a job, that's what they saw me as. They never took that moment to step back and say, so Wendy, what do you bring to the table? What other things have you done? What are your other passions? What are your other interests? And so I think that's always struck with me that, man, if I was a manager in that position, I would do things differently. But, that's just me as an individual. So it's how do we make cast our net broader so that all organizations are really stepping back and looking at the whole person. So I thought that was a great concept, little nugget for me and maybe for others. Any other final just little nuggets that you want to make sure everybody takes away with us today before we wrap up?
I guess to go back to what you said, it's the primary responsibility of leaders and managers is to develop people. And if you take that as being your role, is to develop people and make sure that you're actually adding value to the work that they do by developing them and improving the way and how they do their work. If you focus on that instead of looking for things that people are doing wrong all the time and micromanaging their day-to-day activities, you will find that your organization grows by leaps and bounds. And your key metrics will shoot off the chart. That's almost guaranteed and assured.
If there's one thing that managers could do differently right now, today, in those regular, conversations that they're having, what's like one place that managers could start? Because it seems like it has to start with the managers, and maybe they just don't have the skill set because this is kind of, a change.
For me, the one thing they could do is sit down individually with everybody working for them and have that open conversation and really, really, really get to start to understand that whole person competency, the person beyond the job description. And then be very open about, I want to find ways for you to be able to use your strengths within this organization and within and start that conversation one-on-one, and then do it across your team. It's
you're unleashing potential.
It's funny, right? I mean, it's simple.
Yes.
It's not easy, but it's simple.
Yeah.
Right?
And as an HR leader, as a change expert in trying to move the organization, it's often like moving, the Titanic, before it sinks. We're little tugboats. We're trying to influence the change. So yes, we really appreciate you today, Jeff. And I look forward to looking up your information. And we'd love to hear your feedback on our TMA method. So
yes,
thank
I'm
you
looking
all
forward. We're
so
going to have
much.
a look at we'll have a look at TMA this week.
Oh, cool.
Absolutely.
That's great. We'll connect with you on LinkedIn and engage and learn from each other. So
that would be
we
great.
would just want to say thank you to everyone that joined us on the People Strategies Forum today. We really appreciate your participation. Please let's make the change needed in the world and help find the best talents and the best competencies in our employees, and help each and every one of us, no matter where we are in our careers, to do our very best. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We'll see you all next
Geeks
week.
unite. All right, everyone. Have a great rest of your week. Thanks for joining us.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.